My husband looked me dead in the eye and demanded everything in our divorce. The luxury house, the cars, the multi-million-dollar business. The only thing he did not want was our 6-year-old son calling him a financial drain. My lawyer told me to fight him for every penny. Instead, I smiled, looked at a specific clause in the paperwork, and decided to give my husband exactly what he asked for. He thought he won the ultimate jackpot. He had no idea he just signed his own federal prison sentence. My name is Natalie, 34 years old, and I am a freelance forensic accountant. The collapse of my marriage did not happen with an explosive argument. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday evening in the middle of our custom marble kitchen. The house was quiet. Our son Leo was asleep upstairs. I was wiping down the granite island when Bradley, my husband of 7 years, walked in and slammed a thick stack of legal documents onto the counter. "I want a divorce," he said, loosening his designer tie with an arrogant smirk. "And I am taking everything." I stared at the thick manila envelope. The words, "Petition for dissolution of marriage," were printed boldly on the first page. I did not scream. I did not cry. Years of reviewing fraudulent financial records had trained me to process sudden disasters with absolute emotional detachment. I slowly dried my hands on a towel and looked at him. "Define everything," I said softly. Bradley crossed his arms. His tailored suit jacket tightened across his shoulders. "I am keeping 100% of Apex Holdings. I am keeping this house. I am keeping the Porsche. You can take your little sedan and your clothes." I flipped through the first few pages, my eyes scanning the heavily skewed distribution of our marital assets. "And what about Leo?" I asked, my voice dangerously steady. Bradley rolled his eyes and let out a harsh laugh. "You can have full custody. I am running a high-growth real estate firm, Natalie. I do not have time to play dad on the weekends. Besides, kids are a massive financial drain. I am not paying child support either. You are going to sign a waiver stating you are fully capable of providing for him yourself. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a toxic partner who completely underestimated your intelligence. Listening to the man I once loved reduce our son to a negative line item should have broken my heart. Instead, it crystallized a cold resolve inside my chest. Bradley continued pacing the kitchen. "I built the business. You just pushed papers around and acted like a glorified secretary. I am the CEO. I am the face of Apex Holdings. You really think you deserve half my empire just because you balanced a few checkbooks in the background?" His ignorance was almost comical. I was not a secretary, not a AO. I was the forensic accountant who had quietly managed the back end of his entire operation for 6 years. I knew every hidden account, every falsified loan application, and every dirty tax maneuver he had executed behind my back. I knew that his precious empire was currently under the microscope of 3 different federal agencies. I looked down at the divorce settlement agreement. My eyes locked onto Section 4, the distribution of corporate liabilities. His foolish lawyer had drafted a standard template, leaving the door wide open for shared debt. I reached into the drawer, pulled out a black pen, and clicked it open. "Are you actually going to sign it right now?" Bradley asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "Good girl. At least you know when you are beaten." I did not sign my name on the signature line. Instead, I moved the pen to the liability clause and drew a thick, deliberate circle around the words marital debt. I tapped the pen against the paper. "I am not signing anything tonight," I said calmly. "If you want me to walk away with nothing, we need to adjust this section right here. You need to assume full, total, and exclusive liability for every single thing attached to Apex Holdings, past, present, and future." Bradley's dark eyes suddenly narrowed. He lunged forward and snatched the paperwork right out from under my pen. He shoved the documents into his leather briefcase, his face flushing with sudden, violent anger. "You do not get to dictate terms to me," he snapped. "You are walking away empty-handed. You have exactly 48 hours to pack your bags and get your little financial drain of a son out of my house." The heavy oak front door swung open the very next morning before I had even poured my coffee. Bradley had already left for the office to play his role of the busy executive. I did not need to check the security cameras to know who was letting themselves in. The sharp clatter of designer heels on the hardwood floor announced the arrival of my mother-in-law, Diane. She did not come alone. Two movers followed closely behind her, carrying stacks of flattened cardboard boxes. Diane stood in the foyer, wearing a pristine white pantsuit, looking around my home as if she was inspecting a property she had just purchased at foreclosure. "Put those in the living room," she ordered the men without bothering to greet me. She turned her cold gaze my way. "Bradley called me last night. He said you are finally moving out. I brought boxes so you do not have any excuses to drag your feet. I want you out of this house by tomorrow evening." I took a slow sip of my coffee. "You are early, Diane. Bradley gave me 48 hours. She sneered and walked past me toward the living room. "Well, I am giving you 24. This house is a marital asset and my son needs it cleared. I told Bradley 10 years ago not to marry a broke student with a calculator. I told him you would just drag him down. Now he is a multimillionaire CEO and you are just dead weight taking up space in a house you could never afford on your own." I set my mug down and followed her into the living room. I did not engage with her insults. Arguing with Diane was like trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon. It was a waste of energy I needed for my actual plan. Instead, I pulled an empty box from the stack and began carefully packing Leo's wooden building blocks and storybooks. My silence only infuriated her more. She paced around the room, running her fingers over the expensive furniture. "You know, Natalie, it is really for the best. Bradley is seeing someone who actually matches his status now. Nicole has over 2 million followers on social media. She is young and vibrant. She is exactly the kind of woman a successful man needs on his arm at charity galas. Not a mousy woman who sits at home in sweatpants looking at spreadsheets all day." I carefully taped the box of toys shut. "That is wonderful news, Diane. I am sure Nicole will make a beautiful addition to the family." My lack of reaction seemed to throw her off balance. She scowled, looking for a new way to draw blood. Her eyes landed on the large abstract painting hanging above the fireplace. It was an original piece I had purchased 3 years ago, with a massive bonus I earned from a freelance forensic audit. I bought it because the deep blues and golds reminded me of a calm ocean after a storm. Diane marched straight over to it and reached for the heavy gilded frame. "I will be taking this," she announced, pulling the artwork slightly away from the wall. "This belongs to the family. Bradley has always loved this piece, and I am not letting you pawn it off to pay for your cheap new apartment." I took a step forward, my voice dropping an octave. "Take your hands off that painting, Diane. I paid for that with my own money. It is legally mine. Everything you have is because of my son." She snapped back her manicured nails, digging into the edge of the frame. "You did not earn a dime of the lifestyle you have been enjoying. This stays right here." Before she could yank the painting off the wall, the front door clicked open again. A tall woman stepped into the living room, moving with a quiet, commanding presence. It was Jasmine. She was married to Bradley's older brother Colin and worked as a ruthless corporate attorney in the city. Jasmine and I were never best friends, but we shared a mutual unspoken understanding. We were both outsiders who had married into a family of arrogant narcissists. Jasmine walked straight up to the fireplace. She did not say a word to Diane. She simply reached out her hand and clamped her elegant fingers firmly over Diane's wrist. "Let go of the frame, Diane," Jasmine said. Her voice was smooth, but it carried the weight of a judge reading a verdict. Diane gasped and pulled her hand back as if she had been burned. "Jasmine, what are you doing here? You should be helping me pack up her things." Jasmine ignored her mother-in-law completely. She adjusted her designer tote bag on her shoulder and turned her head to look directly at me. Her dark eyes were sharp, taking in the taped boxes, my calm demeanor, and the complete absence of panic in the room. Jasmine was a woman who made a living destroying liars in court. She knew exactly what a victim looked like, and she knew I was not acting like one. Her gaze locked onto mine, highly suspicious and fiercely calculating. She tilted her head slightly, and a slow, knowing smile played at the corner of her mouth. Jasmine turned her attention back to my mother-in-law. Diane, why do you not go outside and make sure the movers do not scratch the driveway with their truck? I need to speak with Natalie in private. Diane bristled at being ordered around by her daughter-in-law. I am here to ensure she actually leaves, Jasmine. Bradley asked me to supervise the packing, and I am here to ensure you do not create a legal liability for my brother-in-law by stealing marital assets before a judge finalizes the property division, Jasmine replied. Her tone was icy and absolute. Go outside, Diane. Grumbling under her breath, Diane finally turned on her heel and marched out the front door. She left us alone in the quiet living room. The heavy silence stretched between us for a few moments. Jasmine slowly walked over to the kitchen island and leaned against the cold granite counter, crossing her arms. Let us drop the act, Natalie, she said softly. Her dark eyes scanned my face, searching for a crack in my defeated facade. I deal with high-stakes corporate divorces every single day. I know what a woman looks like when she has been broken by a narcissist. I see wives crying in my office every week. They shake. They panic about losing their health insurance. You do not look broken. You are folding clothes with the precision of an assassin. You look like you are packing a parachute. I continued taping the cardboard box in front of me, keeping my movements slow and deliberate. I do not know what you mean, Jasmine. I am just tired. I want out of this house, and I want to secure a quiet life for Leo. Bradley wants everything, so I am giving it to him. Fighting him will only drain the tiny bit of savings I have left. Jasmine let out a short, dry laugh. Do not insult my intelligence. You are a forensic accountant. You spend your life tracing missing funds and dissecting complex financial fraud. Bradley runs a commercial real estate holding company that has supposedly tripled its revenue in 2 years. Yet you are completely willing to let him take Apex Holdings without demanding a single independent audit. That makes absolutely no sense. She was entirely correct, of course. If I demanded an independent audit during the divorce discovery phase, the court-appointed accountant would immediately flag the offshore wire transfers. Bradley would panic. He would try to destroy the evidence before federal investigators could secure a warrant. By pretending to be an ignorant, defeated housewife, I was keeping him comfortable. I was keeping him careless. I kept my eyes focused on the packing tape. Sometimes peace is more valuable than a settlement check, I replied softly. Jasmine stepped closer, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Peace is expensive, Natalie. And men like Bradley do not grant peace. They grant terms of surrender. My husband Colin is cut from the exact same cloth. They are arrogant, reckless, and addicted to other people's money. If you are walking away from a multi-million-dollar company without a fight, it is because you know something about that company that Bradley does not realize you know. I finally stopped packing and looked up at her. We stared at each other, measuring the risks. Jasmine was brilliant. As an African-American woman who had fought her way to the top of a ruthless corporate law firm, she possessed a survival instinct that far exceeded anyone else in this toxic family. She saw right through my camouflage, but I could not afford to confirm her suspicions. If she knew about the pending federal investigation, she would be legally obligated to report it or risk her own license. I appreciate your concern, Jasmine, I said, my voice perfectly neutral. But there is no hidden agenda. I just want a clean break from Bradley and his business. Jasmine stared at me for a long time. She did not argue. She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a small black business card with a single phone number written on the back. She slid it across the kitchen island toward me. This is an unregistered prepaid phone number, she said quietly. I do not use it for my firm. I only use it for emergencies. Keep it. I hesitated before picking up the card and sliding it into my pocket. Thank you. Jasmine picked up her tote bag and adjusted her coat. She walked toward the front door but stopped right at the threshold. She did not turn around when she spoke, her final words hanging heavily in the air. I do not care what you do to Bradley, she whispered. Frankly, I think he deserves whatever is coming to him. But whatever trap you are currently setting in the dark, make sure the blast radius does not hit the kid. The front door clicked shut behind her. I stood alone in the foyer holding the roll of packing tape. For the first time since Bradley had thrown those divorce papers on the kitchen counter, I allowed my true emotions to surface. A slow, sharp smirk spread across my face. Jasmine was right. The blast radius was going to be massive, but my son was already perfectly safe. Later that afternoon, the bright suburban sun beat down on the roof of my sedan as I idled in the pickup line at Leo's elementary school. The line of cars crawled forward inch by inch. I had the windows rolled down to let in the warm breeze. I was just staring at the back of the minivan in front of me when a sharp, rhythmic tapping broke my concentration. Tap, tap, tap. I turned my head. Standing right outside my driver's side window was a young woman who looked like she had just walked off a luxury photo shoot. She was wearing oversized designer sunglasses, a tight athletic set that probably cost more than my first car, and carrying a vibrant orange designer bag. I recognized her immediately from the photos Bradley had carelessly left open on his tablet. It was Nicole. She was 24 years old and carried the loud, unearned confidence of someone who had never faced a single real consequence in her entire life. She rested her arm on the frame of my open window. As she did, the sunlight caught the heavy gold and diamond watch wrapped tightly around her wrist. My forensic accountant brain automatically registered the piece. It was a solid gold watch dripping in factory diamonds. The retail value was easily $40,000. I also knew exactly where that money came from because just last month, Bradley had authorized a $40,000 corporate withdrawal listed under office equipment upgrades. To a normal wife, that watch was a symbol of deep emotional betrayal. To me, it was Exhibit A in a massive federal tax fraud case. "Hello, Natalie." Nicole said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. It was loud enough that two other mothers walking on the sidewalk stopped and turned their heads. "I just wanted to introduce myself since Bradley and I are making things official. I know this must be so hard for you, but honestly, it is time to move on." I did not say a word. I just looked at her blankly. My absolute silence seemed to embolden her further. She leaned in closer, resting her chin on her hand, flaunting that stolen watch right in my face. "Bradley told me your court date is coming up," she continued, projecting her voice so the PTA moms, lingering near the crosswalk, could hear every single humiliating word. "You know, you really should take whatever pennies he offers and maybe upgrade your wardrobe for the hearing. Showing up looking like a tired soccer mom is not going to make the judge pity you. It just makes you look bitter and old." A hot wave of protective anger flared in my chest, but I forced it down, locking it away securely. I let my right hand slip off the steering wheel and drop down to the center console where my phone was resting in the cup holder. Without looking down, I slid my thumb over the screen and blindly tapped the red circle to start a voice recording. I took a deep breath and forced my voice to tremble slightly. I let my shoulders slump, playing the exact pathetic role she desperately wanted to see. "I do not care about my wardrobe, Nicole," I said softly, my voice laced with fake desperation. "I just hope Bradley leaves enough in the settlement for Leo. His medical fund is almost empty, and raising a child on one income is expensive. Please just tell him not to drain the savings completely." Nicole let out a sharp, cruel laugh. She tossed her hair back completely, swallowing the bait I had just dangled in front of her. "Oh, please do not use the kid to try and squeeze more money out of my boyfriend. Bradley is not giving you another dime. He already moved all his real assets into off-the-books accounts that your cheap lawyer will never find. We are flying to Dubai next week to celebrate the divorce finalization. First class all the way. He is buying me a matching diamond necklace out there with the cash he pulled from the company. So stop playing the victim and get a job." My phone silently recorded every single word she said. She had just publicly confessed on tape that the chief executive officer of Apex Holdings was actively hiding marital assets in off-the-books accounts and using untaxed corporate cash for international luxury vacations. It was the exact piece of audio evidence the Federal Criminal Division dreamed of acquiring. I slowly reached down and tapped the screen to stop the recording. I saved the audio file straight to my encrypted cloud server. The trembling in my voice vanished instantly. I sat up straight in my seat, gripping the steering wheel firmly. I looked Nicole up and down, taking in her smug smile, her stolen jewelry, and her absolute staggering foolishness. I did not yell at her. I did not throw an insult. I just smiled a bright, genuine smile that made her perfectly sculpted eyebrows furrow in sudden, deep confusion. "Have fun in Dubai, Nicole," I said, my voice completely devoid of the fear and sadness she expected. "The weather is beautiful this time of year." Before she could utter another word, the line of cars moved forward. I rolled up my window, leaving her standing confused in the exhaust fumes of my sedan. The drive from the elementary school to the downtown business district took exactly 20 minutes. I parked my sedan in the underground garage of a sleek glass tower and took the elevator to the 42nd floor. The polished oak doors of my legal counsel opened into a quiet, high-stakes environment. My attorney, Mr. Lawson, was waiting for me in the main conference room. As soon as I walked in, he tossed the proposed divorce settlement onto the large mahogany table. His face was flushed with frustration. He did not even offer me a seat before he started pacing the length of the room. "Natalie, you cannot seriously be considering this," he said, his voice echoing slightly against the glass walls. "I have reviewed the initial financial disclosures Bradley submitted. Apex Holdings is grossing over $12 million a year. The commercial real estate portfolio alone is worth a fortune. He is offering you nothing. Zero alimony, no equity in the company. He is trying to leave you with a 6-year-old car and a rented apartment. You have to fight him. You helped him build that company from the ground up." I walked over to one of the leather chairs and sat down, crossing my legs. I folded my hands in my lap and let him finish his rant. Mr. Lawson was a brilliant divorce attorney. He was used to wives crying in his office, terrified of losing their lifestyle. He wanted to go to war for me. "I am not fighting for Apex Holdings," I said calmly. "I am giving him exactly what he asked for. 100% ownership." Mr. Lawson stopped pacing and stared at me like I had lost my mind. "Natalie, this is not the time to roll over and play dead. I can get an emergency injunction. I can force a massive forensic audit of his entire company. We will rip his books wide open and expose every penny he is hiding from you. He will be begging to give you half." I looked at him and let a tight, humorless smile cross my face. "You do not need to force an audit, David. I already did one." He frowned, stepping closer to the table. "What do you mean you already did one?" "I am a forensic accountant," I reminded him, keeping my voice completely level. "For the past 6 years, I have quietly managed the back end of Apex Holdings. Bradley thought I was just paying utility bills and filing simple tax returns. He had no idea I was archiving every single transaction he made. Apex Holdings is not a $12 million real estate empire, David. It is a massive illegal shell game." Mr. Lawson froze, his hands resting on the back of a leather chair. "Explain," he demanded, his tone shifting from frustrated to intensely serious. I took a breath and laid out the reality of my husband's supposedly brilliant business. 2 years ago, Bradley started bleeding cash to fund his luxury lifestyle. To cover the deficits, he started applying for commercial loans using heavily inflated property appraisals. Then he moved on to fraudulent small business administration loans. When that was not enough, he started skimming off the top of his legitimate tenant deposits and routing the money through offshore accounts to avoid massive tax liabilities. He has committed systematic wire fraud, bank fraud, and tax evasion. The silence in the conference room was absolute. Mr. Lawson slowly sank into the chair across from me, his eyes wide. "Good Lord," he whispered. "Have you reported this?" I ignored his question and pointed to the divorce settlement lying on the table. If I fight for my 50% share of Apex Holdings, I am fighting for 50% of a criminal enterprise. The moment the federal government catches on, they will freeze every asset attached to that company. If my name is anywhere near that ownership charter, I am going to federal prison right alongside him. I am not losing my son because my arrogant husband decided to play the system. Mr. Lawson looked at the settlement document with sudden disgust, as if it was radioactive. So you want him to take it all? He realized, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. You want to completely sever your legal ties before the house of cards collapses. Exactly, I said, leaning forward. But walking away is not enough. I need airtight legal armor. I need you to draft a very specific clause to add to his settlement offer. I want a total indemnification clause. It must state clearly that Bradley voluntarily assumes 100% of all past, present, and future civil, criminal, and tax liabilities associated with Apex Holdings. Make the language dense. Bury it slightly in the legal jargon so his ego blinds him to the actual danger. Make it sound like a paranoid request from a defeated wife, Mr. Lawson stared at me, a slow look of professional respect dawning on his face. He will never sign that. Any competent lawyer will tell him it is financial suicide. He will sign it, I replied confidently, because he is arrogant. He thinks I am stupid. And he is in a rush to take his young mistress to Dubai. Draft the clause, David. Make it bulletproof. Moving day arrived with a heavy downpour that perfectly matched the bleakness of the situation. Bradley had demanded I be out of the house by the weekend, and he made sure the process was as humiliating as possible. When the budget moving truck I rented pulled up to the driveway, I was shocked to see 3 of his old college fraternity brothers lounging on our front porch. They were drinking expensive imported beers from my refrigerator and laughing loudly as if they were tailgating at a football game. Bradley stood in the center of them, wearing a fitted polo shirt holding a cold bottle. He did not hire professional movers to help me. He brought his friends to supervise my exit and ensure I did not take anything he deemed his property. I ignored their jeers and started carrying cardboard boxes out to the rented truck. It was grueling work. My hands were blistered and my muscles ached. Every time I walked past the porch, one of his friends made a snide comment about my cheap luggage or my sensible shoes. At one point, a friend bumped into me, causing a box of my personal kitchen supplies to crash onto the wet driveway. The sound of breaking ceramic echoed sharply. Bradley just laughed and took another sip of his beer, telling me to clean up my mess before I scratched the pavement. I kept my head down and swept up the broken pieces. I could not afford to lose my temper. But my iron restraint was tested to its absolute limit when Bradley walked over to where my 6-year-old son Leo was standing near the front door. Leo was clutching his favorite stuffed bear, looking confused and frightened by the loud, strange men in our house. Bradley knelt down to his eye level. I froze on the driveway, listening to the poison he was pouring into our child's ears. "Listen to me, buddy," Bradley said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "I want you to look around at this beautiful big house. Look at the pool. Look at your massive bedroom upstairs. You are leaving all of this today because your mother is acting crazy. She does not appreciate nice things, and she wants to steal you away to live in a tiny, dirty apartment. I tried to make her stay, but she is forcing you to leave. Whenever you feel cramped in your new tiny room, just remember who chose this for you." My vision went red. The psychological abuse was so blatant, so perfectly designed to alienate my son and paint me as the villain. I took a step forward, ready to tear into him, but I stopped myself. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted copper. If I caused a scene now, if I threatened him, he might look closer at the divorce settlement. He might ask questions. I had to endure the gaslighting to protect the ultimate plan. I walked over gently, taking Leo by the hand. I smiled down at him, ignoring Bradley completely. "We are going on a fun adventure, Leo," I said softly. "We are going to build a cool fort in our new place." Leo nodded, hugging his bear tighter, and hurried to climb into the back seat of my sedan. I closed his door, securing him safely inside. As I walked back to grab the final box, I glanced through the large bay window of the living room. Bradley and his friends had moved inside out of the rain. Bradley was sitting on the expensive leather sofa holding his silver tablet. He was typing on the screen, bragging loudly about the massive commercial property Apex Holdings was about to close on. I could see him pulling up the company portal to show off the inflated bank balances to his envious friends. He wanted to prove he was the smartest, most successful man in the room. He logged directly into the main offshore routing server using his personal administrative credentials. What Bradley did not know was that 48 hours ago, I had quietly embedded a silent tracking script into the back end of that exact login portal. It was a digital tripwire. As I slid into the driver's seat of my car, my burner phone vibrated in my jacket pocket. I pulled it out and looked at the screen. A line of encrypted text confirmed that the tripwire had been triggered. The script had just instantly pinged the exact IP address and device location straight into the secure federal database I had set up for the investigators. The government now had irrefutable digital proof of him actively accessing the fraudulent accounts from his personal device. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the mansion. Bradley thought he was watching me leave in defeat. He had no idea he had just handed the federal government the final nail in his own coffin. The new apartment smelled of cheap carpet cleaner and old paint. It was a stark and depressing contrast to the sprawling custom-built mansion I had just been evicted from. But as I locked the deadbolt on the flimsy front door, I felt something I had not felt in years. I felt completely in control. I walked down the short, narrow hallway and checked on Leo. He was fast asleep in his small twin bed, clutching his stuffed bear, breathing softly. I pulled the blanket up to his chin, closed his door gently, and walked into the cramped living room. I did not bother unpacking the boxes of clothes or dishes that Bradley and his frat boyfriends had so generously allowed me to keep. The only boxes I cared about were the heavy, reinforced plastic bins containing my computer equipment. I set up my workstation on a cheap plastic folding table I had picked up from a local hardware store. 3 high-resolution monitors, a mechanical keyboard, and a military-grade hardware firewall. I plugged in the encrypted flash drives I had meticulously updated and smuggled out of the house. The soft glow of the screens illuminated the dark room. It was past midnight. The rain was still lashing heavily against the thin window panes. I logged onto my secure virtual private network, routing my connection through multiple offshore servers to ensure absolute anonymity. For the past 5 years, Bradley genuinely believed I was just a glorified secretary playing with spreadsheets. He thought I was simply filing quarterly taxes and paying the electrical bills for his commercial properties. Because of his towering arrogance, he never paid attention when I asked him to sign routine maintenance forms or tax liability addendums. He did not realize that hidden within those mundane stacks of paper were internal audit acknowledgments and legal liability waivers, slowly and systematically separating my identity from his fraudulent activities. Now it was time to assemble the final weapon. I spent the next 4 hours piecing together the ultimate digital dossier. It was a masterpiece of forensic accounting. Bradley was a confident criminal, but he was incredibly sloppy. He had created dummy corporations with painfully obvious names like Apex Consulting and Summit Ventures to funnel money. I matched his forged Small Business Administration loan applications to the exact dates he transferred massive sums of cash to offshore accounts in Cyprus. I traced the heavily inflated property appraisals he used to secure illegal lines of credit. I documented every single instance where he skimmed cash directly from his commercial tenants' security deposits to pay for his luxury sports cars and tailored Italian suits. I took the audio recording I had captured earlier that afternoon at the school pickup line. The one where Nicole loudly confessed to the off-the-books accounts and their upcoming trip to Dubai. I embedded the audio file into the master document. Beside it, I attached high-resolution screenshots of her social media pages, flaunting the $40,000 Cartier watch cross, referenced with the exact corporate withdrawal Bradley had fraudulently labeled as office server upgrades. And the final piece of the puzzle, the absolute kill shot, was the digital IP log I had received just hours earlier while leaving the house. It proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that Bradley was actively accessing the illegal offshore routing servers from his personal tablet inside his own living room. He could never point the finger at a rogue employee or blame a corrupt accountant. His digital fingerprints were permanently burned into the data. My eyes burned from staring at the bright screens, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. I compressed the thousands of documents, spreadsheets, audio files, and server logs into one heavily encrypted master folder. I opened a secure browser window and navigated to the official reporting portal for the Internal Revenue Service Whistleblower Office. I filled out the submission forms using the anonymous digital identity I had established months ago. Under the section labeled Estimated Value of Tax Fraud, I typed the number $12 million. Next, I opened a secondary window connected directly to the Federal Bureau of Investigation White Collar Crime Division Secure Drop. I uploaded the exact same dossier highlighting the wire fraud and the forged federal loan documents. My finger hovered over the Enter key. Once I transmitted these files, the federal government would unleash a machine that could not be stopped. I pressed the key. The progress bar slowly filled across the screen. The screen flashed green and a harsh white text box popped up on the black background. Submission received. An investigating agent will review the attached files within 72 hours. I leaned back in my cheap folding chair and let out a long, slow breath. 72 hours. I glanced at the calendar pinned to the wall. The timing was dangerously tight. The court date to finalize our divorce was exactly 4 days away. The race against time had officially begun. The morning after I submitted the federal dossiers, the real world came crashing back down on my shoulders. I woke up early, intending to buy fresh groceries to fill the empty refrigerator in the new apartment. I walked down the street to the local market, filling a small basket with milk bread and fresh fruit for Leo. When I reached the checkout counter, I handed the cashier my debit card. She swiped it once, then twice. Declined, she said flatly, handing it back to me. I frowned, knowing there was at least $10,000 in our joint checking account. I pulled out my primary credit card. Declined again. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I stepped out of the checkout line, apologizing to the cashier, and pulled up my banking application on my phone. The screen loaded and the numbers stared back at me like a physical blow. Available balance $12. Bradley had completely drained the account. He had called the bank first thing in the morning and transferred every single cent into his private offshore holding accounts. Furthermore, my access to the corporate credit cards had been completely revoked. It was a classic financial abuse tactic. He was trying to starve me into submission, forcing me to crawl back and beg for basic survival money right before our final court date. I walked back to the apartment carrying nothing. But the situation was about to escalate from a financial inconvenience to a genuine nightmare. When I opened the front door, I heard a weak, whimpering sound coming from the bedroom. I rushed in and found Leo tossing and turning under his thin blanket. His face was flushed red and his skin was burning hot to the touch. He had spiked a sudden aggressive fever overnight. Panic gripped my chest. I quickly dressed him, wrapped him in a thick jacket, and carried him 3 blocks down the street to the nearest urgent care clinic. The waiting room was crowded, but they took us to the front desk immediately because of his high temperature. I handed the receptionist my premium family health insurance card. She typed the identification number into her computer. "I am sorry, ma'am," she said, looking up with a sympathetic expression. This policy was terminated at midnight. The primary account holder canceled the coverage. My blood ran ice cold. Bradley had not just taken the money. He had maliciously canceled our son's health insurance out of pure vindictive spite, knowing full well we were in the middle of a stressful move. The receptionist told me the out-of-pocket cost to see a doctor and get the necessary prescription antibiotics would be nearly $400. I had exactly $12 in my bank account and 0 active credit cards. For a split second, the urge to call Bradley and scream at him overwhelmed me. He wanted me to call. He was probably sitting by his phone waiting for my desperate tears. He wanted to hear me break. I looked down at my sick child shivering in my arms, and the panic completely vanished, replaced by an absolute chilling ruthlessness. I was not going to beg a monster to save his own son. I asked the receptionist to give me 5 minutes. I carried Leo over to the waiting room chairs, asking a kind older woman sitting nearby to keep an eye on him for just a moment. I stepped outside into the cold morning air and looked across the street. A bright neon sign flashed above a dingy storefront. Pawn shop. I walked briskly across the asphalt. I looked down at my left hand. My diamond engagement ring was still sitting on my finger. A 2-carat princess cut stone set in platinum. It was the only valuable thing Bradley had not managed to rip away from me yet. I pushed open the heavy glass door of the pawn shop, walked straight up to the glass counter, and pulled the ring off my finger. "I need $400 in cash right now," I told the man behind the counter. "Keep the rest." He examined the diamond under a jeweler loupe, realizing immediately it was worth 10 times what I was asking. He did not ask questions. He handed me 4 crisp $100 bills. The humiliation of standing in a dusty pawn shop selling my wedding jewelry to pay for my child's medicine did not break me. It forged me into steel. I walked back across the street, paid the clinic in cash, and got Leo his antibiotics. Within 2 hours, we were back in the apartment, and his fever finally started to break. He fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. I was sitting on the edge of his bed, brushing the damp hair from his forehead, when my burner phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a picture message from Bradley. The image showed a massive, extravagant seafood tower and a bottle of vintage champagne sitting on a white tablecloth at a high-end downtown restaurant. Nicole's manicured hand was resting on the edge of the table. A leather receipt booklet was clearly visible in the frame, showing a total of over $2,000. Beneath the photo was a short, cruel text message. "Sucks to be poor." I stared at the glowing screen, reading the message over and over again. I did not type a response. I just smiled in the dark room, knowing that the federal agents were currently dissecting his entire life. He was eating lobster on a sinking ship. The next morning, the relentless attacks continued, but this time they did not come directly from Bradley. I was in the kitchen washing Leo's breakfast bowl when my cell phone rang. The caller ID showed the name of a woman I had played tennis with every Tuesday for the past 4 years. She was the head of the membership committee at the exclusive country club Bradley and I belonged to. I dried my hands and answered, expecting a brief moment of sympathy. Instead, her voice was as cold as winter ice. She did not ask how I was doing. She simply informed me that my membership had been formally revoked. When I asked her why, she scoffed loudly. She told me that Diane had spent the entire previous afternoon holding court in the club dining room. My mother-in-law had loudly declared to anyone who would listen that I was being kicked out of my home because Bradley had caught me embezzling money from his company to fund a secret affair. The absolute hypocrisy of the accusation was breathtaking. Diane was projecting her son's exact crimes onto me to control the public narrative. My former friend told me to never contact any of them again and hung up the phone before I could even defend myself. I stood in the cheap apartment kitchen listening to the dial tone. Being suddenly excommunicated from my social circle should have stung. But honestly, it felt like shedding dead weight. However, I knew exactly how to use Diane's vicious smear campaign to my ultimate advantage. Bradley was a textbook narcissist. He fed on a steady diet of admiration and dominance. If he thought I was completely broken and humiliated, he would become careless and blind to his own vulnerabilities. I sat down at my folding table, opened my laptop, and drafted an email to Bradley. I carefully crafted every single sentence to sound like a woman pushed to the absolute brink of despair. I typed frantically, deliberately, making a few typographical errors to make it look like my hands were shaking. "Please, Bradley," I wrote, "I am begging you to make your mother stop. I have already agreed to give you the business and the house. I am not fighting you for anything. Please just let me keep a tiny shred of my dignity. I cannot handle the entire town thinking I am a thief. I am exhausted, and I just want this divorce finalized on Friday so I can disappear. Please call her off. I read it over. It was pathetic. It was desperate. It was exactly what he wanted to see. I hit send. Less than 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed with his reply. A single sentence. Actions have consequences. Natalie, see you in court. I smiled. He swallowed the bait completely. He felt like an invincible king sitting on a throne built of lies. He was so busy enjoying my fabricated misery that he had absolutely no idea the ice was cracking beneath his feet. I spent the rest of the afternoon organizing my new apartment, keeping my mind focused on the upcoming court date. The federal investigators were already reviewing the digital dossier I had submitted. I just needed to survive the next 48 hours without Bradley realizing he was walking into a trap. Just as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the small living room, the unregistered burner phone Jasmine had given me began to vibrate on the table. It was the first time the device had made a sound since she handed it to me. I quickly picked it up and answered. "Are you somewhere secure?" Jasmine asked, her voice tight and strictly professional. "I am alone in the apartment," I replied. "What is going on, Jasmine?" She did not waste time with pleasantries. "I was just in the filing room at my law firm," she said. My husband Colin left a folder on his desk and I took a look inside. Bradley is making massive moves before the judge signs the divorce decree. He just finalized the purchase of a massive commercial plaza downtown. I frowned. "That makes no sense," I said. "All of his liquid cash is tied up in the offshore accounts. He does not have the clean capital to buy a commercial plaza right now." "He did not use cash," Jasmine replied, her voice dropping lower. "He leveraged the marital mansion. He took out a massive second mortgage against the house to finance the commercial deal." My heart skipped a beat. He cannot legally leverage a marital asset during an active divorce proceeding without my explicit written consent, I said. "I know," Jasmine said smoothly. "That is why he forged your signature on the spousal mortgage waiver. I am looking at a copy of the document right now, Natalie. Your signature is right at the bottom, dated yesterday. He is stacking federal bank fraud on top of everything else. You need to be ready." The air in the underground parking garage was thick with the smell of exhaust and damp concrete. I parked my sedan in the darkest corner of the second sublevel, just as Jasmine had instructed. A few moments later, a sleek black town car pulled into the empty space next to mine. The engine cut off and Jasmine stepped out wearing a long trench coat, her face partially obscured by the shadows. I got out of my car and met her between the two vehicles. The steady hum of the ventilation fans provided the perfect cover for our conversation. "I cannot stay long," Jasmine said, glancing around the empty concrete expanse. "Colin thinks I am working late on a corporate merger. He has no idea I am slowly dismantling our entire marriage." I nodded, understanding the precarious line she was walking. "You said Bradley leveraged the house. How did he bypass the mandatory spousal consent laws?" Jasmine opened her designer tote bag and pulled out a thick manila folder. "He did not bypass the laws, Natalie. He explicitly broke them. He paid off a corrupt notary public to stamp a forged signature page on the secondary mortgage application. Colin is the one who connected him with the notary. They think because they are wealthy and connected they can just rewrite reality to suit their needs." She handed the folder to me. "That is the original wet ink copy of the forged document. Do not ask how I got it out of the firm, but it is yours now." I opened the folder and studied the paper under the dim fluorescent lights of the parking garage. There it was. A clumsy imitation of my signature sitting right below Bradley's confident scrawl. It was the absolute final piece of physical evidence required to guarantee a federal indictment for bank fraud. "Thank you, Jasmine," I said, closing the folder and tucking it securely under my arm. "You are taking a massive risk bringing this to me. If your firm finds out you removed original client documents from the filing room, they could disbar you." Jasmine let out a low, bitter laugh. I do not care about the firm anymore. Colin and his partners have been using my legal expertise to shield their dirty deals for years while treating me like a second-class citizen in my own home. I am done playing the dutiful wife to a man who respects nothing but power. I am filing for divorce the moment the federal agents raid Apex Holdings. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small silver flash drive. I held it out to her. Then you are going to need this. Jasmine looked at the drive, her eyes narrowing slightly. What is it? Over the past 3 years, I have noticed irregularities not just in Bradley's accounts, but in the offshore shell companies Colin set up to hide his personal stock portfolios, I explained softly. Bradley is careless, but Colin is arrogant. He used the same registered agents in the Cayman Islands. This drive contains the complete routing numbers, the hidden equity statements, and the exact dates Colin transferred marital funds out of your joint accounts to buy luxury real estate under his mistress's name. Jasmine took the flash drive from my hand, her fingers gripping the cold metal tightly. A fierce, fiery intensity lit up her dark eyes. You found his offshore accounts, the ones he swore did not exist during our last counseling session. Every single one I confirmed. It is enough financial evidence to leave him completely bankrupt when you take him to court. Consider it my final audit for the family. A genuine smile finally broke across Jasmine's face. It was the smile of a woman who had just been handed the keys to her own prison. We stood there in the damp concrete garage, two women who had been chronically underestimated by the men who swore to love them. We did not need to exchange emotional platitudes. We understood the assignment perfectly. We reached out and shook hands, a silent pact sealed in the shadows. As I turned to get back into my car, Jasmine reached out and touched my arm, stopping me. There is one more thing you need to know, Natalie, and it changes the timeline significantly. I turned back to face her, feeling a sudden spike of adrenaline. What is it? Bradley is getting impatient. Jasmine warned, her voice tight with urgency. He wants the commercial plaza deal closed immediately so he can access the new line of credit for his trip to Dubai. He called his lawyer an hour ago and paid a premium to expedite the court docket. The judge approved the request. Your divorce hearing is no longer scheduled for next month. My heart hammered against my ribs. When is it? Jasmine looked me dead in the eye. Bradley's lawyer pushed the court date up to this Friday. That is less than 48 hours away. Are you ready? I looked at Jasmine in the dim light of the parking garage and nodded. I am completely ready. Let him push the date up. We parted ways, and the next 36 hours vanished in a blur. Fast forward to Thursday morning. The pre-trial mediation took place in a massive glass-walled conference room downtown. The air conditioning was turned down so low, the room felt like a meat locker. I sat on one side of the polished mahogany table with my attorney, David Lawson. The tension in the air was so thick it was suffocating. We were waiting for the final settlement review. The heavy glass door swung open. Bradley walked in wearing a custom-tailored suit, looking like a man who had already won the lottery. He did not come alone. Nicole trailed right behind him, wearing a skin-tight designer dress and the exact $40,000 watch I had reported to the IRS. Mr. Lawson immediately stood up and objected to her presence. Bradley just smirked and pulled out a chair for his mistress. She is my future wife, he announced loudly, dropping his briefcase onto the table. She stays or we take this to trial and I bury your client in endless legal fees. I placed a calming hand on my lawyer's arm and shook my head. Let her stay, I said quietly. I wanted Nicole there. Her presence inflated Bradley's ego, making him infinitely more reckless. Bradley's lawyer, a sharp-looking man named Mr. Pierce, opened his leather briefcase and slid a stack of papers across the table. This is the final settlement offer, he said. His tone was brisk and utterly devoid of empathy. My client retains 100% ownership of Apex Holdings and all subsidiary companies. He retains the primary marital residence, the luxury vehicles, and the newly acquired commercial plaza. Your client will assume full custody of the minor child, but my client is waiving parental rights in exchange for zero child support. Furthermore, your client waives all rights to alimony. Mr. Lawson turned bright red, his professional composure cracking. This is not a settlement, Pierce, he snapped loudly. This is an absolute robbery. My client is entitled to half the marital estate. She helped build that company. Bradley laughed out loud, leaning back in his leather chair and throwing his arm around Nicole. She balanced a few checkbooks. David, do not make her out to be a financial genius. She is lucky I am not making her pay me back for the years she lived rent-free in my luxury home. I looked down at the massive stack of papers. My heart was pounding rapidly, but not from fear. It was the exhilarating thrill of the hunt. I had to play this performance perfectly. I let my hands shake just a tiny bit as I slowly flipped to the fourth page of the dense legal document. I stopped at the section detailing corporate liabilities. I took a sharp, ragged breath, deliberately widening my eyes as if I had just read a death sentence. I looked up at Bradley, my expression perfectly mimicking raw panic. Bradley, I cannot sign this, I said, my voice trembling realistically. He rolled his eyes, letting out a heavy sigh. Oh, here come the dramatic waterworks. I ignored his insult and pointed a shaking finger at the document. It says here that marital debts are divided equitably. But you just bought a massive commercial plaza. You are taking out huge lines of credit. I do not want any part of your future debts. What if your business fails and you lose it all? What if the banks come after you for default? I cannot afford to pay off your corporate loans. Nicole let out a mocking giggle. Oh my God, she is literally terrified of being poor. Bradley leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. His dark eyes gleamed with absolute predatory triumph. He saw exactly what he desperately wanted to see. A weak, terrified woman who did not understand high-level corporate finance. He saw a woman so scared of imaginary debt that she was willing to throw away millions of dollars in equity just to feel safe. You really are pathetic, Natalie, he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. Apex Holdings is grossing millions. The banks love me. I am never going to fail in my entire life. But if you are so terrified of my success hurting your little minimum wage lifestyle, we can fix that right now. He turned to his lawyer. Pierce, change the wording right now. Write it down explicitly that she has zero connection to my company. I take all the financial risk. She wants out right now. Let us lock her out permanently and forever. Mr. Lawson slammed his hands down on the polished mahogany table. He was a man of strict legal principle, and he was absolutely not going to let his client be bullied into financial ruin without a massive fight. He glared fiercely at Bradley across the table and then turned his panicked attention to me. Natalie, you cannot agree to this, he urged, his voice rising in genuine distress. He is taking blatant advantage of your emotional exhaustion and fear. You are legally entitled to federal protections without surrendering your well-earned equity. If we go before a judge, they will structure the debt so you are shielded but still receive your rightful payout. Do not let him intimidate you into walking away empty-handed today. I looked at David Lawson, appreciating his fierce dedication to my well-being. But he was playing checkers while I was quietly playing three-dimensional chess. I raised my right hand, silencing him mid-sentence. David, stop! I said loudly, cutting through his impassioned legal defense. I am not fighting for equity. I turned my attention back across the wide table, locking my eyes with Bradley. I will walk away with absolutely nothing, I declared, my voice echoing sharply in the cold glass conference room. I will sign over the house, the luxury cars, and every single share of Apex Holdings right now, but only if you sign a specific indemnification clause. Bradley leaned back, crossing his arms over his tailored chest, with a look of extreme boredom. Let us hear it then, he mocked loudly. What is the magic condition that makes you finally go away? I did not stutter. I need a legally binding addendum drafted into this settlement today, I stated clearly. It must explicitly state that you, Bradley, assume 100% of all past, present, and future civil, criminal, and tax liabilities of Apex Holdings and any of its subsidiary entities. You take the entire burden. I am completely and permanently indemnified from any legal action or financial clawbacks. For a moment, the massive room was dead silent. Then Bradley burst into loud, obnoxious laughter. He laughed so hard he actually had to wipe a tear from his eye. Nicole joined in immediately, giggling into her manicured hand. "You are actually terrified," he gasped, shaking his head in disbelief. "You think the IRS is going to come knocking because I bought a commercial building downtown? You really are just a paranoid, stupid woman who does not understand the first thing about high-level corporate law. I run a multi-million-dollar empire, Natalie. I am not a street hustler. There are no criminal liabilities to worry about." I kept my face frozen in a mask of fearful stubbornness. "Put it in writing, Bradley." I insisted, playing my part flawlessly. "If you are so untouchable, then it should not bother you to sign it. Give me the absolute peace of mind and you get everything you want." Bradley waved his hand dismissively at his attorney. "You heard her, Pierce," he commanded. "Type up her little safety blanket clause and stick it at the very end of the settlement document. Let her sleep well in her cheap apartment tonight." But Mr. Pierce did not open his silver laptop. He did not pick up his expensive pen. The older, sharp-dressed lawyer sat perfectly still, staring at me with sudden, intense scrutiny. His eyes darted from my face to David Lawson and then down to the settlement papers. Unlike Bradley, Mr. Pierce was a seasoned veteran of complex corporate litigation. He understood that specific legal terminology was never requested by accident. "Bradley, I strongly advise against this," Pierce said, his voice low and incredibly serious. "We do not ever sign blanket indemnification waivers. Assuming total criminal and tax liability retroactively is absolute financial suicide. If there is a random audit or a minor discrepancy, you will have stripped yourself of the ability to claim shared marital responsibility. We need a standard equitable distribution clause. Do not sign this blind waiver under any circumstances." Bradley's smug, arrogant smile vanished instantly. His face flushed with sudden, furious anger. He hated being contradicted, but he absolutely despised being told what to do in front of an audience. "I did not pay you a massive retainer to give me unwanted financial advice. Pierce," he spat, leaning over the table aggressively. "I paid you to draft the paperwork. She is handing me a $12 million company for free, and you are holding up the deal over a paranoid technicality. Do your job and add the clause right now." Pierce calmly closed his leather legal pad. "As your counsel, I am telling you that I will not draft a document that exposes you to unlimited, unverified liability. It is severe malpractice." "Then you are fired," Bradley roared, standing up so fast his chair crashed violently into the glass wall behind him. "Get out of my sight. You are completely off the case. I will hire a lawyer who actually listens to me, someone who is not terrified of a scared housewife." Pierce calmly picked up his briefcase, stood up, and walked out of the room without uttering another word. Bradley pulled out his cell phone, his face red with unhinged rage. "I am calling Marshall," he snapped angrily at Nicole. "He is a yes man who does exactly what I pay him to do. We are getting this settlement signed today." The late afternoon sun cast long, dreary shadows across the cracked pavement of my new apartment complex on Thursday. We were less than 24 hours away from the final court hearing. I was in the small kitchen preparing a simple dinner for Leo when the roar of a high-performance engine shattered the quiet neighborhood. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked over to the thin front window. Bradley had just parked his gleaming silver Porsche directly in front of my building, taking up 2 spaces. He stepped out of the sports car, wearing a sharp navy blazer and dark sunglasses, looking entirely out of place against the backdrop of peeling paint and rusted chain-link fences. He popped the front trunk of the Porsche and pulled out a large black plastic garbage bag. I opened the front door just as he reached the top of the concrete steps. He did not say hello. He simply stepped past me uninvited and dropped the heavy garbage bag onto the worn living room carpet with a dull thud. "There is the rest of the cheap clothes and broken toys you left behind," he said, dusting off his hands as if he had just touched something toxic. I am having the entire house professionally deep cleaned and staged tomorrow afternoon. Nicole is moving her things into the master bedroom this weekend, and she does not want any reminders of your depressing aesthetic cluttering up her new closet. I looked down at the black plastic bag. He had literally packed our son's remaining belongings into a trash bag. It was a petty, calculated move designed solely to make me feel small. I looked back up at him, keeping my expression perfectly neutral. "Thank you for dropping them off, Bradley," I said, my voice flat and completely devoid of emotion. My lack of a reaction seemed to irritate him. He took a few steps further into the tiny living room, looking around at the second-hand furniture and the cramped space with open disgust. He scoffed, shaking his head slowly. "Look at this place," he muttered, running a finger over the edge of my cheap plastic folding table. "You really threw away a multi-million-dollar lifestyle for this. You could have just stayed quiet. You could have just played your part and enjoyed the credit cards. But you had to be a stubborn, ungrateful martyr. Now look at you. You are going to be crunching numbers in a depressing gray cubicle until you are 70 years old just to afford basic groceries." He turned to face me, puffing out his chest, his ego filling the tiny room to the point of suffocation. "Meanwhile, I am closing on the biggest commercial plaza in the city tomorrow morning. My lawyer finalized the new lines of credit today. By the time I am 40, I am going to sell the entire portfolio and retire on a private island. I am upgrading my entire life, Natalie. And you are just a fading memory in a dirty apartment." Before I could respond, the bedroom door creaked open. Leo walked out holding his stuffed bear, rubbing his tired eyes. He stopped in the hallway, looking cautiously at his father. Bradley did not kneel down to hug him. He did not offer a word of comfort. Instead, he pointed a sharp finger directly at me and looked at our 6-year-old son. "Take a good look around this dump, Leo," he said, his voice loud and cruel. "This is what happens when you make stupid choices. I am building an empire, and your mother is living in a shack. Remember this feeling. And whatever you do when you grow up, do not end up a loser like your mom." The sheer venom in his words was enough to make my blood boil. Every maternal instinct in my body screamed at me to strike him across his smug face, to throw him out of my home and protect my son from his toxic garbage. But I stood perfectly still. I placed a gentle hand on Leo's shoulder, pulling him close to my side. I swallowed my anger, hiding it behind a wall of absolute freezing ice. I let him dig his own grave. He needed to leave this apartment feeling like an untouchable god. "We will be fine, Bradley," I said softly, giving him the exact defeated tone he craved. "Just make sure your lawyer is on time tomorrow." He laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Oh, I will be there. I cannot wait to cut the dead weight loose." He turned on his heel and walked out the door, slamming it shut behind him. I stood at the window and watched him get back into his Porsche. As the sports car sped away, leaving a cloud of exhaust in the street, the unregistered burner phone in my pocket vibrated sharply. I pulled it out and opened the encrypted email application. It was a direct message from the field director at the IRS whistleblower office. The text was brief and utterly devastating. "Warrants approved. Federal subpoenas and total asset freezes will be executed simultaneously at all Apex Holdings locations tomorrow at exactly 11 in the morning Eastern Standard Time." I locked the screen and let out a long, slow breath. A terrifying, beautiful smile spread across my face. The final divorce hearing was scheduled for 10 in the morning. Bradley had exactly 1 hour to sign his life away. Friday morning broke with a cold, clear sky. I woke up long before my alarm went off. I did not feel tired. I felt a deep humming energy vibrating through my veins. I walked into the small bathroom of my apartment and turned on the harsh overhead light. I washed my face and stared at my reflection. For the past 6 years, I had dressed the part of the quiet, supportive wife. I wore soft colors and blended into the background, while Bradley commanded the room. Today, I was wearing a sharp, tailored charcoal suit. I pulled my hair back into a sleek, tight twist. I applied a minimalist layer of makeup focusing on sharp, clean lines. I looked into my own eyes in the mirror and I did not see a victim. I did not see a discarded mother. I saw an executioner preparing to swing the blade. I checked my phone one last time to ensure Leo was safely dropped off at his school with strict instructions that only I could pick him up. Everything was perfectly in place. Across the city, the morning was unfolding entirely differently for my soon-to-be ex-husband. While I was drinking black coffee in a cramped kitchen, Bradley was lounging in the penthouse suite of a luxury downtown hotel. He had rented the space to celebrate his impending victory. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows wearing a custom-tailored charcoal suit of his own, holding a crystal flute filled with expensive champagne and orange juice. Nicole was draped over the plush velvet sofa, wearing a white designer dress that looked suspiciously like a bridal gown. She held up her phone, adjusting the lighting and snapping a rapid series of selfies. She leaned against Bradley's chest, holding her mimosa up to the camera, showing off her $40,000 stolen watch. She typed the caption, "Freedom Day, bringing in the millions," and posted it to her 2 million followers. Bradley kissed her cheek, feeling like an absolute king. He genuinely believed that by 10:30 this morning, he would be free of his useless wife and in full control of an unstoppable real estate empire. He checked his gold watch. It was time to go collect his kingdom. I arrived at the municipal courthouse at 9:30. The massive granite steps leading up to the heavy wooden doors felt imposing, but I climbed them with a steady, measured pace. The air inside the building smelled of old paper and floor wax. I walked through the metal detectors and took the elevator up to the fourth-floor family court division. As I stepped off the elevator, the first person I saw was Diane. My mother-in-law was standing in the wide marble hallway wearing a bright floral dress that looked entirely too festive for a divorce proceeding. She was holding a cup of premium coffee and chatting loudly with Bradley's new attorney. She was here to witness what she believed would be my ultimate humiliation. When she saw me walking down the corridor, her face broke into a massive, gloating smile. She actually took a step forward, blocking my path, just to get a closer look at my face. She wanted to see tears. She wanted to see fear. I did not give her a single emotion. I just walked right past her without breaking my stride, treating her like a piece of the furniture. Behind me, the elevator doors opened again, and Bradley stepped out with Nicole clutching his arm. Bradley strutted down the hallway, ignoring me completely. He shook hands with his new lawyer, a man named Marshall. Marshall assured him the clause was drafted as requested. The heavy wooden doors to courtroom 4 opened and the bailiff instructed us to enter. I walked down the center aisle, my attorney David Lawson walking beside me. David was still whispering last-minute pleas for me to change my mind and fight for the equity. I ignored him and took my seat at the petitioner's table. Bradley and his team took their seats across the aisle. Diane and Nicole sat directly behind him in the front row of the gallery, whispering and giggling like schoolgirls at a theater show. I kept my gaze straight ahead. But out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a figure sitting in the very back row of the gallery. She was sitting perfectly still, legs crossed, wearing a sharp black trench coat and large dark sunglasses despite being indoors. It was Jasmine. She skipped her meetings to be here. I briefly caught her eye. She did not smile, but she gave me a single, almost imperceptible nod. The judge walked in and banged the gavel. The show was about to begin. The bailiff called the courtroom to order. Everyone stood as the Honorable Judge Harrison entered from her chambers. She was a stern woman with sharp gray hair pulled back into a severe bun, and dark eyes that had clearly seen decades of bitter family disputes. She took her seat at the elevated bench and adjusted her reading glasses. The heavy thud of her gavel echoed off the wood-paneled walls, signaling the exact start of the proceedings. She opened the thick manila folder containing our final divorce settlement. The courtroom was dead silent, except for the crisp sound of heavy paper turning. As her eyes scanned the pages, I watched her expression shift from routine administrative boredom to deep, professional disdain. She stopped flipping the pages and placed her hands flat on the desk. She looked over the rims of her glasses directly at Bradley. Bradley was sitting up straight with his chest puffed out, trying to project the image of a powerful, untouchable executive. The judge was completely unimpressed by his display. She turned her gaze to his new lawyer, Marshall. "Counselor?" She began, her voice echoing with sharp authority. "I have reviewed hundreds of divorce settlements during my career on the bench. This document is highly unusual. It is incredibly one-sided to the point of being entirely predatory. According to this paperwork, your client is retaining 100% of a multi-million-dollar holding company, multiple commercial properties, the primary marital residence, and 3 luxury vehicles." Marshall stood up quickly, buttoning his suit jacket with a confident, practiced smile. "That is correct, Your Honor. Both parties have reached a mutual agreement regarding the division of assets outside of this courtroom." The judge did not look satisfied at all. She shifted her sharp gaze over to my side of the aisle. "And your client," she said, looking directly at my lawyer, "David Lawson, is walking away with full physical custody of a minor child, absolutely zero alimony, no equity in the business she helped maintain, and she is expressly waiving her legal right to any future child support." David Lawson stood up immediately, his face tight with barely contained frustration. "Your Honor, I have strongly advised my client against accepting these terms. I have urged her to seek a full forensic accounting of the marital estate and to demand her rightful half of the equity." Judge Harrison nodded slowly, appreciating my lawyer's professional integrity. She looked right past him and focused her intense stare entirely on me. The air in the courtroom grew thick. I knew this was the critical moment. If the judge refused to sign the order because she suspected foul play or intimidation, the entire trap would fall apart. I had to convince her that I was just a desperate, exhausted woman who was voluntarily surrendering her kingdom. "Mrs. Natalie," the judge said, addressing me directly, "please stand up." I stood up slowly, making sure to keep my posture slightly submissive. I kept my hands folded nervously in front of me. "I need to ask you directly on the legal record," the judge stated, her voice softening just a fraction with genuine concern. "You are giving up millions of dollars in marital assets and taking zero child support. Are you being coerced? Has your husband threatened you in any way to force you into signing this extremely skewed agreement?" The entire room held its breath. I could feel Diane and Nicole staring at the back of my head from the gallery. I could feel Jasmine watching me from the shadows. I took a shallow breath. I slowly turned my head and looked across the aisle at Bradley. He was glaring at me, his jaw clenched tight, sending a silent, threatening warning for me to stick to the script. I let my eyes drop to the floor before turning back to face the judge. I spoke softly, ensuring the court microphone picked up the slight, carefully manufactured tremor in my voice. "No, Your Honor. I am not being coerced. I am signing this of my own free will." Judge Harrison frowned deeply. "You understand that if I sign this decree today, it is final. You cannot come back in 3 years and demand half of his company because you changed your mind. You will be legally barred from seeking retroactive child support for the years you waived. Why are you doing this?" I looked up at the judge, projecting the perfect image of a broken woman seeking peace. "I just want a clean break, Your Honor," I said softly. "I want no part of his business. I just want to take my son and move on with my life. I can provide for him on my own. I do not want to be tied to Apex Holdings or my husband in any way whatsoever." Judge Harrison stared at me for a long time, searching my face for any hidden signs of distress. Finally, she let out a heavy sigh and leaned back in her heavy leather chair. "The court recognizes that adults of sound mind are legally permitted to make terrible financial decisions," she announced dryly. Across the aisle, Bradley leaned back in his chair, crossing his legs arrogantly. He scoffed loudly, a harsh sound of victory that cut through the quiet courtroom. He leaned over to Marshall and whispered loudly enough for the court reporter to hear. "She is so pathetic. Let us just get this over with so I can get back to making real money." Judge Harrison ignored Bradley and his disrespectful whispering. She picked up her pen, ready to sign the final page and make the divorce official. But before her pen touched the paper, she paused. Her eyes caught the densely worded paragraph at the very bottom of the document. It was the specific addendum I had demanded. The courtroom fell completely silent again as she adjusted her glasses and read the text carefully. I watched her eyes track back and forth across the page. She read it once, then she read it a second time. She slowly placed her pen down on the heavy wooden desk and looked up. "Mr. Marshall," she said, her voice sharp and filled with genuine disbelief. "Did you draft this final clause on page 12? Marshall stood up quickly, nodding his head. "Yes, Your Honor. It was a condition requested by the petitioner and my client readily agreed to it to expedite the proceedings today." The judge looked at Marshall as if he had just confessed to a crime. She picked up the document and held it up. "I want to read this into the official court record," she announced. Her voice boomed through the quiet room, ensuring every single person present heard the exact terminology. Section 4, paragraph B, states that the respondent Bradley voluntarily and fully assumes 100% of all past, present, and future civil, criminal, and tax liabilities associated with Apex Holdings and all of its subsidiary corporate entities. It further states that the petitioner, Natalie, is permanently and entirely indemnified from any legal action, federal audits, or financial clawbacks, regardless of her previous affiliation with the company. She lowered the paper and stared directly at my soon-to-be ex-husband. Her expression was a mixture of professional warning and outright shock. "Mr. Bradley, please stand up," she commanded. Bradley stood up, buttoning his tailored jacket. He flashed a charming, completely arrogant smile at the judge. He was utterly convinced he was the smartest person in the room. "Sir," the judge continued, her tone deadly serious, "I need you to understand exactly what you are signing here today. This is an absolute blanket waiver of liability. By signing this document, you are legally confirming that you have full and total knowledge of every single financial transaction your company has ever made. You are voluntarily assuming full criminal and tax liability for the entirety of this LLC's existence. If the Internal Revenue Service or any federal regulatory agency finds discrepancies, you will have zero legal recourse to distribute the blame." She leaned forward, resting her hands on the bench. "You understand that this explicitly waives your right to claim ignorance if financial irregularities are found. If your accountants made a mistake or if funds were mismanaged, you alone will bear the absolute weight of the federal penalties. Are you completely certain you want to sign this clause?" The tension in the room was electric. My lawyer, David Lawson, was staring at the floor, shaking his head at what he believed was a terrible mistake on my part. Next to me, I kept my hands folded tightly in my lap, staring down at the polished table. I was projecting the image of a terrified wife hoping her husband would take the burden away. Bradley let out a soft, confident chuckle. He looked back over his shoulder at Nicole, who was smiling brightly at him. Then he looked at his mother, Diane, who was nodding in proud agreement. He turned back to face the judge, his ego swelling to fill the massive courtroom. "It is my company, Your Honor," he replied, his voice loud and incredibly boastful. "I built Apex Holdings from the ground up. I am the chief executive officer, and I know exactly how my business operates. My soon-to-be ex-wife is just easily frightened by big numbers and standard corporate loans. She wants a safety blanket, and I am more than happy to provide it so we can conclude this matter today. I take full absolute responsibility for every single dime that flows through my accounts." Judge Harrison stared at him for a long, heavy moment. She gave him one final opportunity to save himself. "You are stating for the court record that you accept total unmitigated liability for all corporate actions past and present?" "Yes, Your Honor," Bradley confirmed without a single second of hesitation. "Let us make it official." Underneath the table, my hands were trembling. But it was not from fear. It was the massive surge of adrenaline flooding my system. My heart pounded fiercely against my ribs, beating like a war drum. He had said it. He had confirmed it on the legal record in front of a sworn judge and a court reporter. He had just voluntarily wrapped the federal indictment around his own neck and pulled the knot tight. I risked a quick glance back toward the gallery. Diane was beaming with pride. Nicole was typing on her phone, likely updating her social media followers about her wealthy, soon-to-be fiancé. But sitting in the very back row, shrouded in shadows, Jasmine suddenly sat up straight. She took her hands out of the pockets of her trench coat and leaned forward, resting her elbows on the wooden bench in front of her. She lowered her dark sunglasses just a fraction, her sharp eyes locking onto the back of Bradley's head. The trap had officially snapped shut. Judge Harrison looks at Bradley one last time. She sees his unwavering arrogance and his absolute refusal to listen to reason. She nods slowly, accepting his verbal confirmation on the official court record. She hands the thick stack of settlement documents to the bailiff. The bailiff walks down the short carpeted steps from the bench and approaches our tables. The heavy silence in the courtroom is broken only by the rhythmic tapping of the court reporter's keyboard, capturing every single legally binding word of this historic mistake. The air conditioning hums quietly above us, keeping the room chilled, but I feel perfectly warm. The bailiff approaches Bradley's table first. He places the documents flat on the polished wood. Bradley does not even bother to read the final page again. His hubris blinds him completely. He practically snatches the expensive gold pen from his lawyer's hand. He leans over the table and signs his name with a massive dramatic flourish. The sharp scratching sound of the pen against the thick legal paper echoes in the quiet room. He presses down so hard, the ink bleeds slightly through the page, leaving a permanent mark of his own foolishness. He is signing his own financial death warrant, and he does it with a massive, arrogant grin on his face. The bailiff retrieves the signed paperwork and walks across the aisle to my table. He places the documents in front of me, aligning them perfectly with the edge of the table. David Lawson. My attorney lets out one final defeated sigh. He leans over and whispers a quiet, desperate warning, telling me it is not too late to stop this madness. I do not look at David. I look down at the signature line. My hand does not shake. I pick up my simple black pen. I sign my name with a slow, steady, and deliberate motion. With those cursive letters, I am officially cutting the cord. I am entirely disconnected from Apex Holdings. I am legally protected from the massive federal storm that is about to make landfall. The bailiff takes the fully signed documents back up to the bench and hands them to Judge Harrison. She reviews both signatures carefully, ensuring they are legible and properly dated. She picks up her heavy black ink stamp. She presses it down firmly onto the front page of the settlement. The loud thud of the stamp echoes like a final heartbeat in the quiet room. She closes the folder and looks out at the courtroom, adjusting her glasses one last time. The divorce is officially granted, Judge Harrison announces, her voice carrying a tone of absolute finality. The marital assets and all associated corporate liabilities are hereby legally separated exactly as outlined in this binding agreement. You are dismissed. The sound of her gavel striking the wooden block is the exact sound of my absolute freedom. Before the judge even stands up to leave the bench, Bradley is already on his feet. He turns to his new yes-man lawyer Marshall and thrusts his hand out. The two men share a loud, obnoxious fist bump right there in the middle of the courtroom. Bradley turns around to look at the gallery. Diane is clapping her hands together softly, her face glowing with toxic maternal pride. Nicole is literally bouncing on her heels, adjusting her tight dress, and smiling brightly at the man she thinks is a limitless cash machine. Bradley buttons his custom suit jacket and takes a few steps toward the center aisle, deliberately placing himself in my path. I stand up slowly, smoothing out the wrinkles in my charcoal skirt. I pick up my small handbag. David Lawson is aggressively packing his briefcase, clearly frustrated by what he perceives as a massive failure on his part. I walk around the table and stop a few feet away from my new ex-husband. Bradley looks me up and down with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. He leans in, slightly lowering his voice just enough so the judge cannot hear him, but making sure I catch every single cruel syllable. I told you I would take everything, he whispers, his breath smelling faintly of expensive hotel coffee and mints. You played a stupid game, Natalie, and you lost completely. You are walking out of here with nothing but the clothes on your back. Go back to your miserable little apartment and try to scrape together a pathetic life. Enjoy the bus ride home, sweetheart. I do not react to his insults. I do not cry. I do not offer a witty comeback. I simply look past his shoulder toward the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom. The large analog clock mounted on the wall above the exit catches my eye. The long, black minute hand shifts forward with a loud mechanical click. My eyes lock onto the bold black numbers. The courtroom clock ticks to exactly 10:58 in the morning. 2 minutes. There are exactly 2 minutes left before the world as Bradley knows it ceases to exist. I look back into his arrogant dark eyes and offer him a perfectly serene smile. I turn away from his arrogant smile and push through the heavy oak doors of courtroom 4. The polished marble hallway is wide and brightly lit by large windows overlooking the busy downtown streets. Behind me, I hear the loud celebratory footsteps of my former husband and his entourage. They push through the wooden doors laughing loudly, as if they have just conquered the entire world. Diane immediately wraps her arms around Bradley in a massive theatrical hug. I am so incredibly proud of you, she announces, her voice echoing sharply against the cold stone walls. You finally cut the dead weight loose and secured your future. Bradley smiles warmly, patting his mother's back while looking directly over her shoulder at me. Nicole steps forward, her designer heels clicking aggressively on the hard marble floor. She stops right in front of me, deliberately blocking my path to the elevator bank. She reaches into her vibrant orange luxury handbag and pulls out a crisp $100 bill. She holds it between her perfectly manicured fingers, flashing her stolen diamond watch for me to see. Then she deliberately opens her fingers and drops the money right at my feet. Buy the kid a decent lunch today, she sneers, her lips curling into a cruel, mocking smile. Consider it a parting charitable donation from the brand new Mrs. Bradley. I do not flinch. I do not look down at the green money resting on the dusty floor. I look straight into Nicole's heavily made-up eyes, and my serene smile never wavers for a single second. My absolute lack of humiliation clearly frustrates her small mind. She fully expects me to cry or yell or stoop down to pick up the cash like a beggar. I do none of those pathetic things. I simply step right over the $100 bill, crushing George Washington's face slightly beneath the sole of my sensible shoe. I take 2 steps back, leaning casually against the cool marble wall near the heavy steel elevator doors. I raise my left wrist and tap the glass screen of my Apple Watch. The bright digital display lights up instantly. 10:59 in the morning. The numbers glow with absolute promise. I watch the seconds tick by in perfect silent rhythm. 57, 58, 59. The digital display rolls over to 11:00, perfectly synchronizing with the official Eastern Standard Time. It is exactly 11 in the morning, the exact moment the federal warrants become fully active across the entire city. The exact moment the joint strike teams of federal agents breach the secure glass doors of Apex Holdings. For a fraction of a second, the marble hallway is filled only with the sound of Diane loudly congratulating Marshall on his brilliant legal maneuvering. Then the comfortable silence completely shatters. A loud, frantic ringing erupts from Marshall's expensive leather briefcase. He pauses mid-sentence, apologizing quickly to Diane as he unzips the leather compartment and pulls out his mobile device. He glances at the glowing screen, and his professional, confident smile instantly vanishes into thin air. Before Marshall can even swipe his finger to answer the urgent call, a second phone starts ringing. It is Bradley's custom loud ringtone blaring aggressively from the inside breast pocket of his tailored suit jacket. Bradley rolls his eyes, letting out a heavily annoyed sigh. It is probably the central bank calling to confirm the new commercial credit line he boasts loudly to Nicole. He pulls the sleek device out of his pocket. But before he can even look at the caller identification, a third phone goes off. It is Diane's phone ringing shrilly from the deep depths of her floral-patterned purse. 3 cell phones ringing simultaneously in a chaotic, overlapping chorus of incoming disaster. The celebratory, triumphant atmosphere evaporates instantly, replaced by a sudden, bizarre, and heavy tension. Marshall answers his phone, stepping away from the group and pressing the device against his ear. "Hello," he says sharply. Within seconds, his posture collapses. He grabs the edge of a marble pillar to steady himself. Bradley, annoyed by the interruption, aggressively swipes his own phone screen. "What is it?" he snaps, expecting to bark orders at a terrified subordinate. I lean quietly against the wall, watching the exact moment his reality fractures. I watch the thick muscles in his jaw lock tight. The arrogant light completely extinguishes from his dark eyes. The warm blood drains from his face so incredibly fast it looks like magic. His tanned skin turns a sickly pale white, leaving him looking exactly like a corpse standing in a tailored suit. He stops breathing entirely. His mouth opens slightly, but absolutely no sound comes out. The untouchable king is finally executed by his own hand. Bradley finally slides his thumb across the glowing green screen of his mobile device and presses it hard against his ear. He does not even have a chance to say a single word before the frantic voice of his chief operating officer screams through the receiver. The volume is so loud that the panicked words echo sharply in the wide marble hallway. "What do you mean the FBI is at the office?" Bradley roars, his voice cracking violently. The smug superiority he carried just moments ago is entirely obliterated. He grips the phone so tightly his knuckles turn pure white. He paces wildly in a tight circle, his chest heaving. "What do you mean my accounts are frozen? That is impossible. I just deposited $2 million yesterday. Call the bank right now and fix this immediately. But the bank cannot fix this." Marshall drops his own phone to his side. The expensive yes-man lawyer is visibly hyperventilating. His chest rises and falls in rapid, erratic gasps. He stumbles forward, grabbing Bradley's arm to stop his frantic pacing. "Bradley, listen to me." Marshall gasps, his voice high-pitched and trembling with absolute terror. "That was my senior partner at the firm. The Securities and Exchange Commission and the Internal Revenue Service just executed a massive joint raid on your corporate headquarters. They are not just asking questions. They have 5 years of dual ledger accounting. They have the offshore routing numbers. They are seizing absolutely everything under the RICO Act." Bradley's jaw drops open. The phone slips from his sweaty fingers and hits the hard marble floor with a sharp crack, shattering the glass screen. He does not even look down at it. Diane drops her premium coffee. The hot liquid splashes across her expensive shoes, but she does not seem to notice. "Bradley, what is he talking about?" she demands, her voice shrill with sudden rising panic. "My bank just sent me an automated text message saying the secondary mortgage on my house is in default. Bradley, you promised me my house was safe." Nicole steps back, clutching her vibrant orange designer handbag to her chest, as if someone is about to steal it. Frozen, she repeats, her heavily glossed lips trembling. "What do you mean your accounts are frozen?" "Bradley, what about the trip to Dubai? What about the matching diamond necklace? You promised me we were flying first class tomorrow morning." Bradley cannot answer any of them. He is completely paralyzed. His mind is frantically trying to process the magnitude of the catastrophe. He looks at Marshall, his eyes wide with desperate pleading. Marshall, do something, he begs, his voice reduced to a pathetic, high-pitched whine. "File an injunction. Stop the asset seizure. Tell them it is a misunderstanding." "I cannot do anything," Marshall yells back, losing all professional decorum. "You are completely exposed. You just signed a binding federal document assuming 100% of the criminal and tax liability for a company that is currently being raided by the federal government. You explicitly waived your right to claim ignorance. They have the physical proof of your fraud, and you just gave them the legal permission to hold you entirely responsible. I cannot save you, Bradley. No one can save you. You are going to federal prison." The reality of his situation finally crashes down on him like a concrete vault. The entire empire he built on lies, theft, and manipulation has been completely vaporized in less than 60 seconds. He has no money, he has no company, he has massive federal debts, and he has signed away his only legal defense. Bradley slowly turns his head away from his hyperventilating lawyer. His neck moves stiffly as if the gears rust inside his body. He turns to look directly at me. I am no longer leaning casually against the marble wall. I have stepped forward into the center of the hallway. I am standing with perfect, rigid posture. My shoulders are pulled back and my chin is held high. The meek, defeated facade I wore for the past 6 years is entirely gone. The quiet, exhausted mother has been completely erased. In her place stands the brilliant, ruthless forensic accountant who orchestrated his absolute destruction. Bradley stares at me, taking in my tailored suit, my steady breathing, and my calm, unblinking eyes. He sees the absolute absence of surprise on my face. In that single terrifying moment, he finally understands. He realizes that I did not just discover his secrets. I weaponized them. I built the trap, baited it with my own fake desperation, and handed him the pen to sign his own death warrant. I look at the broken, terrified man standing in the ruins of his own arrogance. I tilt my head slightly to the side, allowing a slow, genuine smile to spread across my face. You said you wanted everything, Bradley. I say, my voice calm and perfectly clear, cutting through the chaotic noise of the hallway. Now you have it. For a split second, the absolute silence in the wide marble hallway is deafening. Then the last remaining shred of Bradley's sanity violently snaps. He does not yell. He unleashes a guttural, animalistic roar that echoes loudly off the high vaulted ceilings of the courthouse. He lunges forward, closing the distance between us in 2 massive, aggressive strides. His hands are outstretched, his fingers curled tightly into claws, aiming directly for my throat. He wants to tear me apart with his bare hands right there in the open corridor. But I do not even take a single step back. I do not flinch. I stand perfectly still because right behind me, the heavy oak doors of courtroom 4 are still wide open. The 2 armed court bailiffs who had just overseen our supposedly peaceful settlement hear the sudden violent commotion. They burst into the hallway, moving with trained military precision and lightning speed. Before Bradley's outstretched hands can even brush the fabric of my tailored suit, a massive shoulder slams directly into his ribs. The heavy impact lifts him slightly off his feet. The second bailiff grabs him roughly by the collar of his expensive custom jacket and violently sweeps his legs out from under him. Bradley crashes face first onto the unforgiving marble floor with a sickening heavy thud. The sound of his nose breaking is sharp and distinct, cutting through the chaotic noise. Stay down right now. One of the bailiffs barks, driving a heavy tactical knee directly into the center of Bradley's back, pinning him flat against the stone. He aggressively twists Bradley's arms behind his back, snapping cold steel handcuffs around his wrists with a sharp metallic click. Stop resisting, or you will catch a felony assault charge on a federal officer right here in the courthouse. Bradley thrashes wildly against the cold stone floor, completely ignoring the bailiff's strict commands. Blood is dripping rapidly from his broken nose, staining the pristine white collar of his tailored shirt in bright crimson drops. He twists his head frantically against the marble, desperately trying to locate his attorney in the crowd. Marshal, he screams, spitting blood and saliva onto the floor. Marshal, void the contract right now. Tear it up. Tell the judge I was under extreme duress. Tell her she lied to me. Tell her I did not read the final page. Void the damn divorce settlement right now. Marshall is standing several feet away, shaking his head back and forth so fast it looks like a nervous tick. His expensive leather briefcase is slipping from his sweaty fingers. Are you completely insane? Marshall screams back, his professional, polished demeanor entirely shattered by the magnitude of the disaster. He points a violently trembling finger at the broken man pinned to the floor. I cannot void a binding legal document that you literally demanded to sign. You explicitly signed the total liability waiver in front of a sworn judge not even 5 minutes ago. You looked her dead in the eye and proudly confirmed it on the official court record. She is completely legally protected, and you are going to federal prison, Bradley. The federal agents have your dual ledger books. They have your offshore accounts. I am withdrawing as your legal counsel immediately effective right this second. The devastating words hit the hallway like a live fragmentation grenade. Diane, who had been watching her golden child get violently tackled to the floor, suddenly lets out a high-pitched, wheezing gasp. Her face drains of all color, instantly matching the pale marble walls surrounding her. Her hand shoots up to violently clutch her chest, gripping the fabric of her bright floral dress. "My house," she whispers, her voice trembling with absolute, unadulterated horror. "If the government seizes your corporate assets under the RICO Act, they are going to take my house. You forged the papers, Bradley. You lied to me." Diane stumbles backward, her expensive high heels slipping awkwardly on the highly polished floor. Her back hits the cold marble wall and she slowly slides down, collapsing into a pathetic heap on the ground. She is actively hyperventilating, clutching her chest, unable to process the terrifying reality that her perfect son has just dragged her into absolute financial ruin and potential homelessness. And then there is Nicole. She is standing a few feet away, silently watching the chaotic, violent scene unfold. Her 2 million social media followers cannot save her from this reality. She looks at Bradley, bleeding and handcuffed on the floor. She looks at Diane, gasping for air against the wall. Then she looks down at her $40,000 Cartier watch. The greedy, calculating gears in her mind finally click perfectly into place. She realizes with absolute terrifying clarity that her wealthy sugar daddy is no longer a multimillionaire. He is millions of dollars in debt to the federal government. He is a massive walking legal liability. Nicole does not rush forward to comfort him. She does not offer to post his bail. She slowly takes one single step backward, then another. She silently turns around, her designer heels clicking softly and rapidly against the marble, and briskly walks toward the main elevator bank. She does not look back, even once, entirely abandoning ship and leaving him to drown. I leave Bradley thrashing on the floor. His screams echo down the corridor. I do not look back at him. I adjust my handbag on my shoulder and walk with a steady, measured pace toward the elevator bank. Nicole is frantically pressing the down button, trying to escape the sinking ship before the federal agents arrive. She hears my footsteps and turns around. The absolute panic in her eyes is deeply satisfying. She presses her back against the polished metal doors of the elevator, trapped. I stop right in front of her. I am close enough to smell her perfume. She looks at me as if I am holding a weapon. "What do you want?" She stammers, her voice barely a whisper. "I did not know about the fraud, I swear. I just wanted a nice lifestyle." I look down at her wrist. The heavy gold and diamond timepiece glitters under the harsh fluorescent lights of the hallway. "You might want to return that Cartier watch, Nicole." I say, my tone completely conversational, as if I am giving her friendly fashion advice. The Internal Revenue Service considers that stolen property now. They are going to track every single corporate withdrawal Bradley made over the past 5 years. If you try to pawn it or hide it, they will charge you with receiving stolen federal assets. They do not care about your social media followers. They only care about the missing money. Her face goes completely blank. She grabs her own wrist, covering the diamonds with her hand, as if trying to make the evidence disappear. The elevator arrives with a soft chime. The doors slide open. "Enjoy your flight to Dubai," I say, stepping aside to let her enter, assuming they do not pull your passport at the airport gate. Nicole practically dives into the empty elevator car, hammering the lobby button. The metal doors slide shut, cutting off her terrified expression. I turn away and walk toward the main staircase. I do not want to wait in the suffocating building another second. I push through the heavy courthouse doors and step out onto the wide granite steps. The bright morning sunlight washes over me. I take a deep breath, letting the clean oxygen fill my lungs. Behind me, the heavy wooden doors swing open again. I turn to see Jasmine stepping out into the sunlight. She takes off her dark sunglasses and looks at me. For a moment, neither of us says a word. Then Jasmine tilts her head back and bursts into loud, triumphant laughter. It is a rich, joyful sound that cuts right through the serious atmosphere of the municipal building. I have spent 10 years watching that arrogant family destroy people, Jasmine says, catching her breath. But watching you hand him the pen to sign his own destruction was the most brilliant legal maneuver I have ever witnessed in my entire life. I smile, walking down the steps beside her. He did all the heavy lifting, Jasmine. I just pointed him in the right direction. We reach the bottom of the granite steps and walk toward the private parking area reserved for attorneys and court personnel. I expect to walk to the nearby transit station, but Jasmine stops in front of a gleaming black brand-new Mercedes sport utility vehicle. It still has the temporary dealer tags in the window. Jasmine reaches into her deep trench coat pocket and pulls out a sleek silver key fob. She tosses it to me through the crisp morning air. I catch it in the palm of my hand, looking at the heavy key in confusion. "What is this?" I ask, running my thumb over the smooth silver emblem. Jasmine smirks, resting her hand on the hood of the pristine luxury car. "Well, since Bradley decided to steal all the money from your joint checking account earlier this week, I figured you needed reliable transportation. I did a little digging into the private trust documents you gave me. I used the leverage against Colin to secure this vehicle yesterday afternoon. I believe this was purchased and registered entirely under your maiden name, correctly shielded from the marital estate, and absolutely safe from the federal asset freeze." She gives me a slow, deliberate wink. I look at the beautiful car and then look back at the brilliant woman standing right across from me. "You bought a car with his brother's hidden money. I reclaimed stolen family assets," Jasmine corrects me, her smile widening. "And technically you earned it by providing the audit that freed me from my own miserable marriage. Go ahead and start it up right now, Natalie. We have a lot of celebrating to do today, and you have a wonderful son to pick up from school this afternoon." 24 hours later, the collapse of Apex Holdings was the lead story on every local news network. I sat at my small folding table with a fresh cup of coffee watching the television screen. The news anchor maintained a grave expression as footage played of federal agents carrying dozens of heavy cardboard boxes out of the sleek downtown headquarters. The banner across the bottom of the screen read, "Multi-million-dollar real estate fraud exposed." The reporter detailed the joint task force raid conducted by the FBI and the Internal Revenue Service. Bradley had been formally arraigned late Friday evening. Because of his extensive hidden assets in Cyprus and the Cayman Islands, the federal judge deemed him a severe flight risk. Bail was completely denied. He was currently sitting in a concrete holding cell wearing an orange jumpsuit stripped of his tailored suits and his towering ego. The news segment highlighted the sheer scale of the embezzlement. It was a complete public humiliation. The public betrayals began almost immediately. I opened my laptop and checked social media. It did not take long to find exactly what I was looking for. Nicole was broadcasting live on Instagram to her 2 million followers. She was sitting on the floor of what looked like a hotel room wearing a simple, oversized sweater and no makeup. She was actively sobbing, wiping fake tears from her cheeks with the sleeve of her shirt. She stared directly into the camera, playing the role of the innocent victim with absolute dedication. "I am just so heartbroken and traumatized," she cried, her voice trembling. "I had absolutely no idea about the illegal things Bradley was doing behind closed doors. He manipulated me completely. He lied to me every single day. I am a victim of his toxic deception, and I am officially ending our relationship right now. I just want to focus on my healing journey." I closed the laptop, shaking my head. She did not care about his deception. She only cared that the money was gone, and she was terrified of being indicted as an accessory. She threw him under the bus without a second thought. While Nicole was managing her public relations crisis, Diane was facing a very real and permanent catastrophe. My burner phone buzzed on the table. It was a voicemail from a blocked number, but I recognized my mother-in-law's shrill voice immediately. She was no longer speaking to me with her usual wealthy country club arrogance. She was hyperventilating, practically screaming into the receiver. "Natalie, you have to help me," Diane sobbed, the panic making her voice crack wildly. "I just had a sheriff deputy knock on my front door. They handed me a formal eviction notice. Bradley used my home. He used the house I have lived in for 30 years as collateral for one of his shell companies, and he forged my signature on the guarantor forms. The bank is seizing the property on Monday. They are taking my home. You have to tell the federal agents that I had nothing to do with this. Please call me back." I deleted the voicemail. Diane had spent years treating me like absolute garbage while she happily lived off the stolen money her son provided. Now the bill had finally come due and she was bankrupt. Across town, the domino effect of my forensic audit was hitting its final target. Colin returned to his massive suburban townhouse after a long day of trying to manage the fallout of his brother's arrest. He loosened his tie, exhausted and deeply annoyed. He expected to walk into the smell of a warm dinner and the quiet obedience of his wife Jasmine. Instead, he unlocked the front door and stepped into an eerie, absolute silence. He called out her name, but the large house was completely empty. He walked into the master bedroom and stopped dead in his tracks. Jasmine's massive walk-in closet was completely cleared out. Her designer clothes and jewelry were gone. Only empty wooden hangers remained. Colin rushed back down the sweeping staircase, his heart pounding with sudden dread. He walked into the pristine kitchen. Sitting perfectly centered on the dark marble island was a thick manila folder. Next to it rested the small silver flash drive I had given Jasmine in the underground parking garage. Colin opened the folder. The first page was a formal petition for divorce demanding immediate dissolution of the marriage. The pages underneath made his blood run cold. Jasmine had printed out the exact routing numbers, the hidden equity statements, and the detailed transfer logs showing every single dime he had hidden in offshore accounts to buy luxury real estate for his own mistress. She had used my evidence to build a bulletproof legal cage around him. He was trapped just like his brother. On Monday morning, I traded the chaos of my small apartment for the quiet, sterile authority of a federal high-rise building downtown. I passed through 3 separate security checkpoints, handing over my identification to armed guards before being escorted to the Financial Crimes Division on the 19th floor. The heavy soundproof door clicked shut behind me, sealing me inside a windowless conference room. 2 federal agents were waiting for me at a long metal table. The lead investigator was a man with graying hair and tired eyes who introduced himself simply as Agent Reynolds. Scattered across the table in front of him were dozens of printed spreadsheets, bank statements, and the encrypted silver flash drives I had submitted the week before. Agent Reynolds gestured for me to sit down. He did not look at me like a suspect. He looked at me with an expression of profound professional respect. "I have been auditing white-collar crime for over 20 years, he said, leaning forward and folding his hands. "I have seen spouses turn on each other. I have seen angry wives submit shoeboxes full of messy receipts and vague accusations. But I have never seen a digital dossier as perfectly executed as this one. You mapped out 5 years of complex international wire fraud and dual ledger accounting with absolute surgical precision. You handed us a fully prosecuted case on a silver platter." I sat up straight, resting my hands calmly in my lap. "I am a forensic accountant, Agent Reynolds," I replied. "I take my job very seriously." He chuckled softly, shaking his head. Bradley truly had no idea who he was sleeping next to for the past 6 years. Reynolds picked up a thick file folder from the corner of the table. "Let us talk about your legal standing in this massive mess. When we execute a RICO raid of this magnitude, we typically freeze every single asset associated with the primary suspect, including the joint accounts of their spouse. We were prepared to sweep your name into the primary indictment." I kept my breathing steady, waiting for the final confirmation. "But your timing was impeccable." Reynolds continued opening the folder. "We breached the Apex Holdings headquarters at exactly 11 in the morning on Friday. We pulled the municipal court records yesterday, Judge Harrison stamped your final divorce decree at exactly 10:58. You legally severed your financial ties to the marital estate 2 minutes before the federal freeze went into effect. The second agent sitting next to Reynolds slid a copy of my divorce settlement across the table, pointing to the final page. And then there is this clause, he said, tapping his finger directly on the total indemnification waiver Bradley had arrogantly signed. I have never seen a defense attorney allow a client to sign a retroactive assumption of total criminal liability. Your husband officially went on the record and took 100% of the blame for the tax evasion and the fraudulent loans. Because you finalized the separation of assets prior to the raid and secured this bulletproof waiver, the Department of Justice has officially cleared you of all charges. You are not a target of this investigation, Natalie. You are entirely free to go. The massive weight I had been carrying on my shoulders for months finally evaporated. I was safe. My son Leo was safe. I did not have to look over my shoulder for the rest of my life, worrying about federal indictments or frozen bank accounts. I had successfully walked through a blazing inferno and emerged completely untouched. I stood up, preparing to shake their hands and leave the building. "Thank you, gentlemen," I said. "I appreciate your time and your discretion. Please sit back down, Natalie," Agent Reynolds said, holding up his hand. "You are cleared of all criminal charges, but we are not quite finished with our business here today." I slowly lowered myself back into the chair, slightly confused. "Did you need me to testify at his trial?" I asked. "He will never make it to trial," Reynolds stated confidently. "With the evidence you provided, his new public defender will force him to take a massive plea deal just to avoid a life sentence." "No, I asked you to stay because we need to discuss your compensation." "Compensation?" I repeated, my brow furrowing. Agent Reynolds opened a sleek leather folio and withdrew a crisp official government document featuring the official seal of the Internal Revenue Service. He slid it slowly across the metal table until it rested directly in front of me. He tapped the top of the paper with his pen. "The federal government seizes all stolen assets in these types of major fraud cases," he explained, his voice entirely serious. "We anticipate recovering at least $12 million in stolen funds from his offshore accounts and liquidated commercial properties. Under the official IRS whistleblower program, private citizens who provide actionable intelligence resulting in the successful prosecution of massive tax fraud are legally entitled to a substantial reward." He leaned back in his chair and looked me dead in the eye. "You are officially classified as the primary informant, Natalie. Under federal law, you are entitled to between 15 and 30% of the recovered funds." I sat perfectly still in the sterile federal conference room as Agent Reynolds explained the math. The Joint Task Force had officially located and seized over $12 million in illicit funds spread across Bradley's offshore accounts, luxury vehicles, and commercial properties. Because I handed them the exact routing numbers and forged documents, the recovery process was going to be incredibly swift. Under the whistleblower statutes, my minimum 15% share calculated out to slightly over $1.8 million. However, because the information led to a massive organized crime takedown under the RICO Act, Reynolds confirmed the payout would likely hit the maximum threshold. I was looking at an estimated reward check of nearly $2.5 million, tax-free, clean, legal, and entirely mine. Just days ago, I pawned my engagement ring to buy antibiotics for my son because my husband drained our bank account down to $12. Now the very government he tried to defraud was about to make me a multimillionaire. I signed the preliminary informant paperwork with a steady hand. Agent Reynolds shook my hand one final time, thanking me for my service. I walked out of the federal building feeling lighter than I had in a decade. My financial future was completely secure. 2 weeks later, the dust finally started to settle. I moved Leo into a beautiful rental home in a safe neighborhood. But before I could fully close this dark chapter of my life, there was one final loose end I needed to tie up. I drove my own sedan to the county correctional facility on a gray Tuesday afternoon. I walked through the heavy metal detectors and handed my identification to the bored corrections officer behind the thick bulletproof glass. I was directed to the maximum security visitation ward. The room was stark and cold, divided entirely by a thick wall of smudged plexiglass. I took a seat in a hard plastic chair, picking up the heavy black telephone receiver mounted to the wall. I waited in absolute silence. A heavy steel door on the other side of the glass clanked open. A guard escorted prisoner number 8421 into the visitation booth. It was Bradley. The sight of him was almost jarring. The untouchable chief executive officer who used to spend thousands of dollars on tailored Italian suits and premium haircuts was entirely gone. He was wearing an oversized faded orange county jumpsuit that looked rough and uncomfortable. His dark hair was greasy and unkempt. The bridge of his nose was heavily taped and deeply bruised from where the court bailiff tackled him to the marble floor. He looked exhausted, terrified, and completely broken. He shuffled toward the glass partition, his shoulders slumped in total defeat. He sat down heavily in the chair opposite mine and picked up the phone with trembling hands. "Natalie," he gasped, his voice cracking with desperate, raw emotion. "You came! I knew you would come! Please, you have to help me! They have everything! Marshall completely abandoned me! The new public defender says I am looking at 20 years minimum. You have to tell them I did not know about the forged signatures. Tell them it was Colin. Tell them it was my mother. Just tell them something to get me out of here. I cannot survive in this place." He pressed his bruised face against the thick glass, tears streaming down his pale cheeks. He was begging the very woman he had relentlessly abused, mocked, and tried to leave destitute just a few weeks prior. He was waiting for my sympathy. He was waiting for the quiet, compliant wife to save him from his own massive ego. I looked at his pathetic, weeping face through the smudged partition. I did not feel any pity or anger. I felt absolutely nothing for him. I held the heavy black receiver close to my mouth, making sure my voice was crystal clear. "I am not going to help you, Bradley," I said softly. "I just came here to say goodbye." His eyes widened in sudden, absolute terror as the reality of my words hit him. "And I wanted to let you know that Leo is doing absolutely great." I added, my tone perfectly even. "He does not miss the dead weight." Before Bradley could even open his mouth to respond, I pulled the phone away from my ear. I placed the receiver firmly back onto the metal cradle, cutting off the audio connection completely mid-sentence. I stood up, smoothed out my jacket, and turned my back. Behind the thick soundproof partition, Bradley slammed his fists against the plexiglass. He screamed silently into the void, his face contorted in absolute agony, completely stripped of his power, his money, and his family. 6 months later, the crisp autumn breeze swept across the sprawling stone patio of my new home. I sat in a plush outdoor lounge chair, feeling the warm, late afternoon sun on my face. There were no peeling paint chips or rusty chain-link fences here. The property was a beautiful modern estate, surrounded by tall, ancient oak trees, providing absolute privacy and peace. I held a crystal glass of chilled white wine, watching the golden leaves drift down onto the manicured lawn. Jasmine sat across from me, holding her own glass of wine. She looked absolutely radiant. She had traded her stiff, dark corporate trench coats for a relaxed, elegant cashmere sweater. The suffocating burden of her toxic marriage to Colin had been completely lifted from her shoulders. We clinked our glasses together, the sharp sound ringing out into the peaceful yard. We were not just survivors anymore. We were official business partners. Using a portion of my massive federal whistleblower reward, I had launched my own private forensic accounting firm. I did not want to audit boring corporate tax returns or standard municipal payrolls. I had a very specific target clientele in mind. I wanted to help women who were trapped in exactly the same nightmare I had just escaped. Women who were married to arrogant, narcissistic men who used hidden money shell companies and complex offshore accounts to trap them in legally abusive marriages. Jasmine had officially resigned from her high-powered corporate law firm and joined my agency as the lead legal counsel. Together, we were a completely lethal combination. I tracked the hidden money, and she executed the legal traps in the courtroom. Yesterday, we had completely dismantled a wealthy surgeon who thought he could hide $3 million in a fake charity trust to starve his wife out of a fair settlement. When Jasmine dropped my meticulous financial audit on the mediation table, the arrogant surgeon actually started crying. We made sure his wife walked away with the primary house, the pension, and full custody of their children. It was incredibly satisfying work. We were taking the very weapons our ex-husbands had used against us and turning them into a profitable, thriving empire of our own. I took a slow sip of my wine and looked out across the bright green grass. My heart swelled with an overwhelming sense of profound joy. Leo was running across the expansive yard chasing a bright red soccer ball. He was laughing loudly, his cheeks flushed with vibrant color. He was not a financial drain. He was a bright, happy little boy who finally lived in a home completely free of shouting, emotional manipulation, and daily fear. He kicked the ball hard, sending it flying straight into a small pop-up net. He threw his hands up in the air, cheering loudly for himself. I smiled warmly, remembering the cruel, vicious words Bradley had spat at him in that depressing rented apartment. Bradley had told our son not to end up a loser like his mother. Well, his mother was now a multimillionaire business owner living in a custom home, while his father was currently serving a 15-year federal sentence in a maximum security prison, folding laundry for 20 cents an hour. Jasmine set her wine glass down on the low patio table and leaned back, looking at me with a deep, knowing smile. "You know, Natalie," she said, her voice carrying a quiet, profound strength. "We spent years letting those men convince us we were small. They made us believe we needed their money and their permission just to exist in the world. They were so busy looking down on us, they never realized we were holding up the floorboards." I nodded, my gaze drifting from Leo back to my brilliant business partner. We had walked through the absolute darkest fires of betrayal and financial abuse. We had faced the crushing weight of family complicity and the vicious cruelty of selfish women who traded their dignity for a slice of stolen luxury. But we did not break. We adapted. We calculated. And we struck back with absolute, devastating precision. I looked straight ahead, my voice firm, delivering the final, undeniable truth. Let this be a warning to every arrogant man who thinks he can abuse the quiet woman standing behind him. They think they can strip us of our power by taking our money and our voice. They think we are just background characters in their grand delusional stories. But they forget one crucial detail. We built the foundation they stand on. We know every single crack in their armor. And when they finally push us too far, we know exactly which bricks to pull to make their castles crumble. The story of Natalie and Bradley offers a profound masterclass in the absolute power of emotional discipline. In a modern society that frequently equates strength with loudness and aggressive retaliation, Natalie's journey teaches us that true power usually resides in quiet, calculated restraint. When confronted with relentless gaslighting, devastating financial abuse, and public humiliation, Natalie could have easily reacted with explosive anger. Instead, she bravely chose the path of silent observation. The greatest lesson learned here is that a toxic person's most fatal vulnerability is always their own unchecked arrogance. Bradley's massive hubris completely blinded him to the reality that the quiet woman he so easily dismissed was actually the brilliant architect of his total downfall. By refusing to engage in his chaotic emotional games, she protected her peace and maintained the sharp clarity needed to execute her escape. We often feel the overwhelming urge to defend ourselves immediately when we are underestimated or wrongly accused by those closest to us. However, this narrative reminds us that we do not always need to prove our intelligence to people who are determined to belittle us. Sometimes letting a narcissistic person believe they have won is exactly the strategy that gives you the necessary space to secure your actual victory. True dignity is almost never loud. It is the quiet, unwavering confidence of knowing exactly who you are and what you are capable of achieving. Ultimately, taking back your personal control requires strategic patience, emotional detachment, and an unshakable belief in your own inherent value. You do not need to attend every pointless argument you are invited to. If you find yourself underestimated by toxic people in your own life, please take a step back, plan your next move in absolute silence, and share your story of triumph in the comments below.